The morning alarm echoed through the curved corridors of Haven 7, the massive space station that served as home to the Galactic Military Academy. Students from dozens of worlds hurried through the gleaming hallways, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors, shapes, and sizes. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few simply rolled along the polished floors. Tom adjusted his standard human uniform and checked the time on his wrist device. Combat Theory, with Professor Kral. Started in 10 minutes, and being late was never a good idea. The Thaxian professor had a reputation for being tough on students, especially those who showed any sign of weakness or lack of preparation. The classroom doors slid open with a soft hiss as Tom entered. The space was designed to accommodate the wide variety of alien physiology represented in the class. Adjustable seating, atmospheric controls, and lighting systems ensured that every species could learn comfortably. Tom took his usual spot near the back, noting how the other students seemed to naturally group with their own kind. Near the front, 3 Vortan students sat in perfect formation. Their crystalline bodies caught and reflected the classroom lights, creating dancing patterns on the walls. They were known throughout the galaxy for their mastery of energy-based technology. Their homeworld was tidally locked to their sun, and over millions of years, they had learned to harness stellar energy like no other species. To the left, a cluster of hive mind representatives sat in complete silence. Their insectoid features and multiple limbs made them appear intimidating, but Tom had learned they were actually quite friendly once you got to know them. Their species had developed bioorganic technology that merged living organisms with mechanical systems in ways that other species found both fascinating and disturbing. The aquatic Neptunians occupied special water-filled seats that allowed them to breathe comfortably while attending class. Their sonic-based technology was legendary throughout the galaxy. They could create sounds that could shatter mountains or communicate across entire star systems. Their whale-like songs had become the basis for some of the most advanced communication systems in known space. Professor Kral entered the room with his characteristic confident stride. The Thaxian stood nearly 3 meters tall, his 4 muscular arms moving with practiced military precision. His skin had a metallic sheen that reflected his species' evolution on a world rich in heavy metals. 2 sets of eyes allowed him to observe multiple students simultaneously, a trait that made cheating impossible in his classes. "Today marks the beginning of your final examination," Professor Kral announced, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the room. "For the next month, each species represented in this class will demonstrate the pinnacle of their personal combat technology." A ripple of excitement passed through the classroom. This was what everyone had been waiting for. The combat technology demonstration was legendary at the Academy. It was a chance for each species to show off their greatest achievements in personal warfare equipment. "The rules are simple," Kral continued, raising one of his 4 hands to quiet the murmuring students. "You will present the most advanced personal combat device your species has developed. You must demonstrate its capabilities, explain its tactical applications, and defend its superiority over competing technologies." Tom felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. He had known this day would come, but hearing it announced officially made it real. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having only made first contact 50 years ago. Their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards, and their military equipment was often the subject of good-natured jokes among the other species. Each presentation will be evaluated on technological sophistication, tactical versatility, and combat effectiveness, Kral explained, his multiple eyes scanning the room. The species with the highest score will receive honors recognition and preferential placement in advanced combat courses. The Vortan students began whispering among themselves in their musical language, which sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Tom knew they were discussing their energy weapons, probably debating which of their many devastating devices to present. Their plasma cannons could melt through starship armor, and their solar collectors could power entire cities. The hive mind representatives sat motionless, but Tom had learned that their stillness didn't mean inactivity. They were likely communicating through their neural network, sharing thoughts and ideas instantaneously across their collective consciousness. Their bioweapons were things of legend, able to adapt and evolve in real time to counter any threat. The Neptunians produced a series of low-frequency sounds that Tom felt more than heard. Their sonic disruptors could liquefy solid matter or create force fields from compressed sound waves. They had weapons that could make enemies forget how to fight, or fill them with such overwhelming calm that they simply laid down their arms. "Presentations will begin next week," Krall announced. "You have 7 days to prepare. Use your time wisely." As the other students filed out of the classroom, chattering excitedly about their upcoming demonstrations, Tom remained seated. He pulled out his personal device and stared at it thoughtfully. It looked so ordinary compared to the exotic technologies the other species would present. No gleaming crystals, no bioorganic components, no sonic emitters. Just a simple rectangular device that could fit in his pocket. But appearances could be deceiving. Tom had grown up on Earth hearing stories about human ingenuity. While other species had developed incredibly sophisticated solutions to specific problems, humans had always taken a different approach. They built things that could handle whatever situation arose, rather than perfecting single-purpose tools. The device in his hands represented 2 centuries of human engineering philosophy. It wasn't the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, nor the most elegant. But it embodied something that Tom was beginning to realize the other species might not fully understand: adaptability. As Tom finally stood to leave the classroom, he noticed Professor Krall watching him with an unreadable expression. The Thaxian's 4 eyes seemed to be evaluating him, as if trying to determine what the human might be planning. Tom nodded respectfully and headed for the door. Over the next week, Tom would have to decide not just what to present, but how to present it. The other students would showcase the pinnacle of specialized technology. Tom would have to find a way to demonstrate that sometimes the best tool isn't the most advanced one, but the one that never lets you down when you need it most. The first presentation took place exactly 1 week after Professor Krall's announcement. The classroom had been rearranged to accommodate the demonstrations, with a large clear area at the front and additional safety shields for protection. Students filed in with obvious excitement, eager to see what their classmates would present. The Vortan students had won the honor of going first, and their chosen representative, a tall crystalline being named Riven, stepped forward carrying what appeared to be a translucent rod about the length of his forearm. The crystal caught the classroom lights and split them into rainbow patterns that danced across the walls. "This is the stellar focus array," Riven announced, his voice creating harmonious echoes in the chamber. "It represents the culmination of 10,000 years of Vortan energy manipulation technology." With practiced movements, Riven activated the device. The crystal rod began to glow with an inner light that grew steadily brighter. Students throughout the room shielded their eyes as the intensity increased. With a sharp gesture, Riven directed the beam toward a specially prepared target made of reinforced titanium steel composite. The metal didn't just melt. It vaporized instantly, leaving behind only a cloud of metallic vapor that was quickly cleared away by the classroom ventilation system. The demonstration target, which could have withstood direct hits from conventional explosives, had been eliminated in less than 2 seconds. The stellar focus array can channel the energy of a star and concentrate it into a beam no wider than a hair, Riven explained as the crystal rod dimmed back to its normal appearance. Range is unlimited in space, and it can penetrate any known armor material. Professor Krall made notes on his evaluation pad while nodding approvingly. The other students murmured their impressed comments in various alien languages. Tom had to admit it was an impressive display of raw destructive power. 2 days later, the Hive Mind Collective presented their entry. Their representative was a being called Worker Prime 7, whose insectoid features and multiple limbs moved with perfect coordination. The device they presented looked less like a weapon and more like a living creature. This is the adaptive combat symbiont, Worker Prime 7 explained in the emotionless tone typical of their species. It is both alive and artificial, combining the best aspects of biological evolution with directed technological development. The creature device was about the size of a small dog, with a sleek metallic exoskeleton that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. As the class watched, it began to change. First, it formed into what appeared to be a traditional projectile weapon, complete with targeting systems and ammunition feed. Then it morphed into an energy cannon, then a shield generator, then a communication, a ray. The symbiont bonds with its user and adapts to any combat situation in real time, Worker Prime 7 continued. It learns from each encounter and develops new configurations to counter emerging threats. No two symbiont weapons are exactly alike after extended use. The demonstration was fascinating to watch. The symbiont seemed to anticipate what configuration would be needed next, flowing seamlessly from one form to another. It even demonstrated the ability to split into multiple smaller units that could work independently before reuniting into a single device. Professor Crowell's 4 eyes tracked every movement of the shape-shifting weapon. He made extensive notes and asked several detailed questions about the bonding process and adaptation capabilities. The other students seemed both impressed and slightly disturbed by the biomechanical hybrid. The Neptunians presented on the following Friday. Their representative, a graceful aquatic being called Deep Singer Coral, brought what looked like a simple conch shell, though it gleamed with an oily rainbow sheen that marked it as something far more sophisticated than it appeared. "This is the Harmonic Destructor," Deep Singer Coral announced, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species. "It weaponizes sound itself, using frequencies that can affect matter at the molecular level. The demonstration required special preparation. All students were given protective ear coverings, and the classroom's acoustic dampeners were activated. Deep Singer Coral placed the shell-like device to her lips and produced a note so low that Tom felt it more than heard it. The first target, a block of solid concrete, began to vibrate. Within seconds, hairline cracks appeared across its surface. The vibrations intensified, and the cracks spread until the entire block crumbled into fine powder. The second target was a steel plate, which began to ring like a bell before shattering into fragments as if it had been struck by a massive hammer. But the most impressive demonstration came last. Deep Singer Coral produced a different tone, higher and more complex. A third target, this one made of a flexible polymer, began to change shape. The material flowed and reformed itself into a perfect sphere, then a cube, then a spiral. The sonic vibrations were actually reorganizing the molecular structure of the material at will. The Harmonic Destructor can destroy, reshape, or even temporarily animate non-living matter, Deep Singer Coral explained after the demonstration ended. It can also produce frequencies that affect living beings, causing anything from sleep to complete nervous system shutdown. The weeks continued with one impressive demonstration after another. The gaseous nebulans showed weapons that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, striking targets that seemed completely protected. The rock-like granite people presented devices that could manipulate gravity itself, creating localized fields so intense that they could crush enemies or send them floating helplessly into space. Each presentation showcased technologies that represented millions of years of focused development. Species that had evolved in specific environments had created tools perfectly suited to their strengths and their worlds. The energy mastery of the Vortans, the biological integration of the hive minds, the sonic manipulation of the Neptunians. Each was a masterpiece of specialized engineering. As Tom's turn approached, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of inadequacy. How could human technology, developed over mere centuries, compete with devices that represented geological ages of refinement. The other students had begun to whisper among themselves when they thought he couldn't hear, speculating about what primitive device the human might present. Some guessed he would show an upgraded version of the kinetic projectile weapons that humans had brought with them to the galactic community. Others suggested it might be a crude energy weapon based on technologies borrowed from other species. A few thought he might present something from human history, like chemical explosives or electromagnetic pulse devices. None of them suspected the truth. Tom's presentation would challenge not just their expectations, but their entire understanding of what a weapon could be. The device in his quarters was already prepared and ready. All that remained was to show them that sometimes the most powerful tool wasn't the one that did one thing perfectly, but the one that could do everything adequately. The morning of Tom's presentation arrived with the usual routine of Haven 7's artificial day cycle. Students gathered in the classroom earlier than usual, their excitement barely contained. Word had spread throughout the academy that today, the human would finally reveal what Earth's military technology had to offer. The betting pools had reached unprecedented levels, with most wagers favoring some form of improved projectile weapon. Tom entered the classroom carrying a simple black carrying case, the kind that might hold tools or electronic equipment. Unlike the dramatic entrances of previous presenters, he walked quietly to his seat and placed the case on the floor beside him. No glowing crystals, no writhing biomechanical creatures, no exotic materials that bent light in impossible ways. Just a plain, rectangular case that looked like it could have been made anywhere in the galaxy. Professor Crowell called the class to order with his usual military precision. His 4 eyes surveyed the room, noting the anticipation in every face. The Thaxian had observed dozens of these final presentations over his years of teaching, but he found himself genuinely curious about what the human would reveal. Earth's species had surprised the galactic community before with their unconventional approaches to problems. Today we conclude our demonstration series, Crowell announced. Our final presenter represents one of the newest species to join the galactic community. Tom, please present your species' contribution to personal combat technology. Tom stood and retrieved his case, walking to the front of the classroom with steady steps. He could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, sense the mixture of curiosity and skepticism radiating from his classmates. Some leaned forward in anticipation, while others settled back with expressions that clearly said they expected to be entertained rather than impressed. Setting the case on the demonstration table, Tom opened it with a simple mechanical latch. Inside, nestled in custom-fitted foam padding, lay what appeared to be an unremarkable rectangular device. It was roughly the size of a thick book, with a matte black surface that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. No visible buttons, displays, or obvious interfaces marked its surface. A ripple of confusion passed through the classroom. Several students exchanged glances, clearly wondering if this was some kind of joke. The device looked more like a piece of office equipment than a weapon. After weeks of seeing stellar energy cannons, living symbiotic weapons, and gravity manipulators, Tom's presentation seemed almost anticlimactic. "This is a human multi-tool," Tom announced, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet classroom. "Standard designation, Infantry Survival Kit Mark 7. Every human soldier, explorer, and civilian carries one." The reaction was immediate and exactly what Tom had expected. Barely suppressed laughter rippled through the room. A multi-tool? After demonstrations of weapons that could vaporize starship hulls and manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe, the human was presenting what appeared to be a collection of simple implements? Riven, the Vortan student, leaned toward his companions and whispered something in their musical language. The crystalline beings' bodies flickered with what Tom had learned was their equivalent of amused laughter. Worker Prime 7 and the other hive mind representatives remained motionless, but Tom could sense their collective dismissal through their unchanged postures. Even deep singer Coral produced a series of soft notes that sounded suspiciously like chuckling. The aquatic being's musical communication was usually reserved for serious discourse, making her amusement all the more obvious. Professor Crowell raised one of his 4 hands, calling for silence. His expression remained professionally neutral, but Tom could see the skepticism in his multiple eyes. "Please continue with your demonstration," the Thaxian said, though his tone suggested he expected this to be brief and possibly embarrassing. Tom lifted the device from its case and held it up for the class to see clearly. "This particular unit has been in continuous development for over 2 centuries, he explained. "It represents humanity's approach to personal equipment design." "And what approach is that?" asked Riven, his crystalline voice carrying a barely concealed note of condescension. "Creating tools so simple that even primitive species can use them." Tom smiled at the question. He had been hoping someone would ask exactly that. "Our approach is based on a simple principle," he replied. "Why carry one perfect tool when you can carry every tool you might ever need?" The skeptical murmur that followed this statement was exactly what Tom had expected. The other species had spent eons perfecting single technologies. The idea of carrying multiple inferior tools instead of one superior weapon ran counter to everything they understood about technological development. "I understand your skepticism," Tom continued, turning the device over in his hands. "Your species have each achieved incredible mastery in specific areas. The Vortons have perfected energy manipulation beyond anything humans can imagine. The hive minds have created biomechanical integration that seems like magic to us. The Neptunians can do things with sound that we're only beginning to understand." He paused, looking around the room at the faces of his classmates. Some appeared interested despite themselves, while others maintained their expressions of polite disbelief. "But humans evolved differently," Tom said. "We didn't specialize in one particular strength. We became generalists, and this device represents that philosophy." Worker Prime 7 spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the flat, emotionless tone of the hive mind collective. "Generalization is inefficiency. Specialization produces superior results in all measurable categories." "Does it?" Tom asked, pressing a seemingly invisible switch on the device's surface. "Let me show you what human generalization has produced." The device came alive in his hands. Panels slid open with soft mechanical whispers, revealing an interior far more complex than its simple exterior had suggested. Components unfolded with precise movements, each finding its designated position in what was clearly a carefully choreographed mechanical ballet. The classroom fell completely silent. Whatever they had expected, it wasn't this level of sophisticated engineering hidden within such an unassuming package. Even Professor Crowell leaned forward, his professional interest clearly engaged despite his initial skepticism. "The Mark 7 contains over 200 individual tools and systems," Tom explained as the device continued its transformation. "But more importantly, it contains over 50,000 possible configurations. It doesn't just carry tools, it becomes whatever tool you need." The final configuration settled into place, and Tom held up what now appeared to be a completely different device. The rectangular block had become something that looked like a hybrid between a scientific instrument and a piece of art. Displays had appeared showing readouts in multiple languages and mathematical systems. Sensors extended like mechanical flowers, opening to the light. The laughter had stopped completely. Every being in the room was staring at the transformed device with expressions ranging from curiosity to genuine amazement. Even the hive mind representatives had shifted slightly in their seats, their collective attention focused entirely on Tom's presentation. "Now," Tom said, meeting Professor Crowell's multiple eyes directly, "let me show you what human adaptability can accomplish." The transformed device hummed quietly in Tom's hands, its various components settling into their new configuration with mechanical precision. He could see the change in his classmates' expressions as they realized this was far more sophisticated than anything they had expected from human technology. The dismissive smirks had vanished, replaced by genuine curiosity and, in some cases, visible concern. "Let me start with the basics," Tom said, holding the device so everyone could see its current configuration. Like any multi-tool, it contains standard mechanical implements. With a fluid motion of his fingers across what appeared to be a smooth surface, the device reconfigured itself. Cutting blades extended from hidden compartments, followed by gripping tools, measuring instruments, and mechanical fasteners. Each tool moved into position with practiced efficiency, creating what looked like a mechanical flower blooming in fast motion. Cutting tools, gripping implements, measuring devices, mechanical fasteners, Tom explained as each component appeared. Standard equipment for any repair or construction task. Several students nodded, though Tom could see they were still waiting for the impressive demonstration. Simple hand tools, no matter how elegantly engineered, weren't going to compete with stellar energy weapons or gravity manipulators. Tom's fingers moved across the device's surface again, and the mechanical tools folded back into their hidden spaces. New components emerged, these ones bristling with electronic interfaces and sensor arrays. Small dish-shaped receivers extended on articulated arms, while crystalline components that looked suspiciously similar to Vortan technology began to glow with soft light. "Communication array," Tom announced. "Quantum entanglement transmitters, subspace relay systems, and electromagnetic spectrum analyzers. Range, unlimited across galactic distances. Can establish contact with any known communication protocol in the galactic database." Deep Singer Coral produced a questioning note, her musical language carrying undertones of surprise. Tom nodded in acknowledgement of her unspoken question. "Yes, it includes sonic frequency modulation compatible with Neptunian communication systems," he confirmed, "along with Vortan light pulse encoding, hive mind neural pattern broadcasting, and 47 other standard galactic communication protocols." The device reconfigured again. This time, medical instruments appeared, scanner arrays, surgical tools, and what appeared to be a miniaturized laboratory unfolded from the central core. Microscopic analysis chambers opened like tiny jewel boxes, while injection systems and tissue repair tools arranged themselves in perfect surgical formation. "Medical suite," Tom explained, running a demonstration scan on his own hand. The results appeared on a small display in multiple formats: humanoid anatomy, Thaxian forearm configuration, Vortan crystalline structure analysis, and several others. Full biological analysis, emergency surgery capabilities, pharmaceutical synthesis, and trauma stabilization for any known galactic species. Professor Krau's 4 eyes widened visibly. The medical capabilities alone represented technology that most species kept as specialized equipment in their hospitals and research facilities. To miniaturize it into a portable device while maintaining compatibility across different alien biologies was an engineering achievement that demanded respect. But Tom wasn't finished. The medical components folded away, replaced by what appeared to be a small manufacturing facility. Atomic-level manipulator arms emerged alongside material synthesis chambers and molecular assemblers. Energy collectors deployed like mechanical spider legs, followed by power storage cells and distribution networks. "Matter compiler," Tom announced, "can analyze and replicate any non-living material at the molecular level. Raw material input, atmospheric gases, local minerals or recycled components, output, tools, spare parts, shelter components, or consumable supplies." Worker Prime 7 leaned forward, her insectoid features betraying the first sign of emotion Tom had ever seen from the hive mind collective. "That is impossible," she stated in her flat voice. "Matter compilation at that scale requires massive energy input and industrial-level containment systems." Tom smiled and gestured to the device's energy collectors, which were already drawing power from the classroom's lighting system, the ambient electromagnetic fields, and even the heat generated by the various alien metabolisms in the room. Human energy efficiency standards, he explained. We've learned to work with whatever power sources are available. The demonstration continued, the device reconfigured into a shelter constructor, projecting holographic blueprints while its manipulator arms began assembling a miniature structure from materials drawn from the classroom atmosphere. Environmental systems appeared next, complete with air purifiers, water recyclers, and atmospheric processors that could make any planet habitable for multiple species simultaneously. Each new configuration drew gasps and murmurs from the increasingly amazed audience. This wasn't just a collection of tools. It was an entire civilization's worth of technology compressed into a package no larger than a textbook. The engineering challenges involved in creating such a device boggled the minds of species who had spent millennia perfecting single technologies. Navigation computer, Tom continued as stellar positioning arrays and quantum compass systems deployed. Emergency beacon with galactic positioning integration. Geological survey equipment. Atmospheric analysis suite. Weather prediction and climate modification capabilities. The Nebulans, who had remained silent throughout most of the previous presentations, began producing their gaseous equivalent of excited chatter. Their phase shift technology was sophisticated, but they had never seen anything approach this level of multidimensional functionality in a single device. Finally, Tom addressed what everyone had been waiting to see. And yes, he said, it functions as a weapon system when necessary. The device's transformation this time was more dramatic than any previous configuration. Combat systems emerged with military precision. Projectile launchers, energy-focusing arrays, sonic disruptors, and electromagnetic pulse generators. But unlike the specialized weapons the other species had demonstrated, each system was clearly designed to work in coordination with the others. Projectile system with adaptive ammunition synthesis, Tom explained as targeting systems activated and ammunition fabrication began. Energy weapons with power draw from any available source. Sonic disruptors with frequency adaptation for any known species vulnerabilities. Non-lethal options include stunners, neural disruptors, and paralysis fields. But the most impressive aspect wasn't the weapons themselves. It was how they integrated with everything else the device could do. The medical scanner provided real-time biological analysis of targets, allowing the weapon systems to adjust their output for maximum effectiveness while minimizing permanent harm. The communication array could interface with enemy equipment, disrupting their coordination or even turning their own systems against them. Professor Crowell stood up from his seat, his forearms hanging loose at his sides in what Tom recognized as the Thaxian expression of complete amazement. "This is not just a weapon," the professor said slowly. "This is an entire military support system." "No, sir," Tom replied, beginning the device's return to its simple rectangular configuration. "This is what every human carries. Soldiers, explorers, civilians, children old enough to be trusted with tools. We don't think of it as a weapon system or a support system. We think of it as basic equipment." The classroom fell into complete silence as the implications sank in. Every other species had presented their ultimate achievement in personal combat technology, devices that represented the absolute pinnacle of their technological capabilities. Tom had just demonstrated something that humans considered standard, equipment, something so common that their entire population carried it as a matter of course. As the device settled back into its unassuming rectangular form, Tom looked around the room at the faces of his classmates. The expressions of dismissive amusement were gone, replaced by a mixture of awe, concern, and something that might have been fear. They were beginning to understand that they had fundamentally misunderstood human technological philosophy, and the implications were staggering. The 3 days following Tom's demonstration passed in an unusual quiet throughout Haven 7. Students who normally gathered in boisterous groups to discuss their classes now spoke in hushed whispers. The betting pools that had surrounded the final presentations had closed without payouts, as no one had accurately predicted what the human would reveal. Even the faculty seemed subdued, their usual confident discussions replaced by thoughtful contemplation. Professor Krull found himself unable to focus on routine academy business. The Thaxian warrior scholar had witnessed thousands of combat demonstrations throughout his military career, but Tom's presentation had challenged fundamental assumptions he had held for decades. He kept returning to his evaluation notes, reading them over and over, trying to fully grasp the implications of what he had seen. The numbers were staggering. While other species had presented devices that excelled in single areas, the human multi-tool had demonstrated competence across every major technology category in the galactic database. Its energy efficiency ratings exceeded anything in Academy records. Its materials science applications surpassed the achievements of species who had devoted their entire civilization to mastering matter manipulation. Its communication capabilities rivaled dedicated systems that required specialized training to operate. But the most disturbing aspect was Tom's casual mention that this was standard equipment. Every human carried one. Children were trusted with devices that contained more technological sophistication than most species achieved in their greatest military research programs. What did that say about humanity's overall capabilities? On the fourth day after the presentation, Professor Krull called Tom to his office. The Thaxian's workspace reflected his military background. Functional furniture, weapons displays, and tactical maps covered the walls. Tom entered to find the professor standing before a large holographic display showing the technical specifications of various combat technologies. "Sit," Krull said without turning around. His forearms moved in gestures that Tom had learned indicated deep thought in Thaxian body language. "I have been reviewing your presentation extensively." Tom took the offered seat, noting the tension in the professor's posture. This was clearly more than a routine post-demonstration discussion. "Your device," Krull continued, finally turning to face his student, "has forced me to reconsider everything I thought I understood about military technology development." The professor activated his desk display, showing comparative analysis charts that must have taken days to compile. Energy output ratings, material durability indices, operational complexity measurements, dozens of categories where the human device had achieved ratings that defied conventional understanding. The Vortans have spent 50,000 years perfecting energy manipulation, Krull explained, highlighting relevant sections of the data. Their stellar focus array represents the absolute pinnacle of that specialization. It can deliver more raw destructive power than any other handheld weapon in known space. Tom nodded, remembering the impressive demonstration that had vaporized the reinforced target in seconds. The hive minds have achieved biomechanical integration that borders on miraculous, Krull continued. Their adaptive combat symbiont represents evolution and technology working in perfect harmony. It can counter any threat by developing appropriate responses in real time. Again, Tom acknowledged the remarkable capabilities he had witnessed. The Neptunians can manipulate matter itself through sonic vibration, Krull said, his voice carrying a note of wonder. Their harmonic destructor can reshape reality at the molecular level using nothing but carefully controlled sound waves. The professor paused, his multiple eyes focusing intently on Tom. Each of these achievements represents millions of years of focused development, entire civilizations dedicated to perfecting single technologies. And yet, Krull gestured at the comparative charts, where the human device's ratings appeared in every category. Not always the highest rating, but present in every single category. Your species approached the problem differently, Krull concluded. Instead of perfecting one solution, you created adequate solutions for every possible problem. Tom chose his words carefully. Professor, humans have always been adaptable. We evolved as generalists on a world that demanded flexibility. When we developed technology, we applied the same principles. But the implications, Krull said, beginning to pace with his characteristic military stride, are staggering. If every human carries equipment of this sophistication, what does that say about your species' overall technological capabilities, your military potential? The question hung in the air between them. Tom realized that his demonstration had inadvertently revealed far more about humanity than he had intended. He had wanted to show that human adaptability was valuable, but he had instead demonstrated that human baseline capabilities might be far more advanced than anyone had realized. "Sir," Tom said carefully, "humans don't think of this as advanced technology. We think of it as basic preparedness. The philosophy is simple. Be ready for anything." Professor Crowell stopped pacing and stared at his student. "Basic preparedness," he repeated slowly. "Tom, do you understand what you demonstrated? You showed capabilities that most species would classify as strategic-level technologies. Matter compilation, quantum communication, molecular manufacturing. These are things that require massive installations and specialized training." "On Earth, maybe," Tom replied. "But we've been part of the galactic community for 50 years. Now, we've learned from everyone. The multi-tool incorporates principles from dozens of species' technologies, adapted to work together in a single package." The realization hit Professor Crowell like a physical blow. Humans hadn't just developed their own technology. They had absorbed and integrated the greatest achievements of every species they encountered. While other civilizations guarded their technological secrets, humans had been learning, adapting, and improving upon everything they observed. "You've been taking the best from everyone," Crowell said, understanding finally dawning in his voice. "We've been learning," Tom corrected gently. "It's what humans do. We see something that works, we figure out why it works, and then we make it work better in combination with everything else we know." Over the following weeks, news of Tom's demonstration spread throughout the academy and beyond. Faculty members began requesting detailed technical analyses. Military advisors arrived from various species' homeworlds to observe additional demonstrations. The simple human multi-tool became the subject of intensive study and not a little concern. The final grades were announced on a quiet morning, delivered to students' personal communication devices as they went about their daily routines. Tom received his results while sitting in the Academy's observation deck, watching the stars through the massive, transparent aluminum windows. Professor Crowell's evaluation was extensive, but the summary was simple. Highest marks ever recorded in Academy history. The human multi-tool represents a paradigm shift in personal technology philosophy that will influence military thinking for generations to come. But the real recognition came in the weeks that followed, as changes began appearing throughout the Academy curriculum. Courses in adaptive technology integration joined the standard offerings. Multi-role equipment design became a required subject for all engineering students. The concept of technological versatility began spreading beyond the academy into research facilities and military development programs across the galaxy. Within a year, the term human-style engineering had entered the galactic technical vocabulary. Research teams from the most advanced civilizations began studying human design philosophy, trying to understand how a species barely half a century into galactic civilization had achieved such remarkable integration of diverse technologies. The Vortans, masters of energy manipulation, started developing multi-spectrum weapons that could switch between different energy types instead of focusing solely on stellar power. The hive minds began creating biomechanical systems that incorporated non-organic technologies, breaking their millions-year tradition of purely biological solutions. Even the proud Neptunians started experimenting with sonic devices that could perform functions beyond their traditional sound-based applications. Professor Crowell found himself at the center of this technological revolution. His combat theory classes evolved to include principles of adaptive equipment design and multi-role functionality. Students who had once focused exclusively on perfecting their species' traditional strengths now spent equal time learning to integrate technologies from other civilizations. The changes weren't limited to the Academy. Military forces throughout the galaxy began requesting human advisors to help redesign their equipment doctrines. Species that had spent eons developing single-purpose weapons started creating devices that could adapt to multiple roles. Trade. Agreements between civilizations increasingly included technology-sharing clauses as everyone sought to learn from everyone else. Tom completed his education at the Academy with highest honors, but more importantly, he had become an unofficial ambassador for human technological philosophy. Requests for lectures and consultations came from across the galaxy. Universities, military colleges, and research institutions all wanted to understand how humans approached problem-solving. Years later, when Tom had become a professor himself, he would often reflect on that day in Professor Kral's classroom. His simple demonstration of a standard human multi-tool had done more than earn good grades. It had changed how an entire galaxy thought about technology. The device still sat on his desk, looking as unremarkable as ever, but now it carried the weight of representing a philosophy that had revolutionized galactic civilization. The lesson that emerged from that classroom demonstration became known throughout the galaxy as the human principle. The most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the strongest weapon, but the one who never runs out of options. It was a principle that would reshape military doctrine, technological development, and even diplomatic relations for generations to come. And it all started with a simple question that Tom had answered in the most human way possible. Not by showing what they could do best, but by showing that they were prepared for anything.